I'm Mr. Hall, the subject leader for history at St. Peter's School. And I'm just going to try and give you an overview of what we study in history and why I think and why my colleagues think it's a really good choice for students making their options. So we follow the AQA history course at St. Peter's, and the 4 units we study you can see on the screen in front of you. The first 2 we study in year 10 and the second 2 in year 11, and each unit accounts for 25% of the course. So I'll just say a few more words about the individual units to give you a flavour for what we cover. In year 10 we start with British migration and empire from 793 AD to the present day. So this basically picks up with the invasion of the Vikings in the 8th century to England, the English kingdoms. And what we look at here is the arrival and departure, so immigration and emigration of different peoples to and from Britain throughout this period. But we also look at the story of England and how it changes from a divided country with different kingdoms in the Anglo-Saxon period through to the unification of England, and then the growth of the British Empire, its interaction with other countries. So we look at then how Britain takes over areas of Africa and India, as case studies on the Americas as well. And we look at then the impact that Britain has on areas of the world, but also that those colonies as they become have on Britain in return. So it really gives an appreciation of this interaction. And it goes right through to the present day of the recent years, anyway, of the Brexit process and Britain's relationship with the EU. Now, what's made this really relevant over recent years is things like the Windrush scandal, when the Home Secretary fell over the treatment of Caribbean immigrants that came to Britain in the 40s, 50s and 60s perfectly legally, but were treated like illegal immigrants. And even more recently, we've had the Black Lives Matter protests in Britain, the tearing down of the statue of Edward Colston in Bristol, the slave trader, and the questioning of people that were held up before as heroes of empire and British heroes, like Winston Churchill, who had his was a racist scrawled on the statue. So it's really ignited a massive debate at the moment for how Britain should be seen in the world and how some of these figures and actions should be seen. And this course really does give students a real appreciation for those aspects. It's a really interesting course to study. We then move on to look at conflict and tension from 1894 to 1918. So this effectively is the causes and key events of the First World War. Some of the students always enjoy studying. This marries up quite nicely with some of the war poetry they do in English. And obviously it's an event which they appreciate the significance of in terms of world history. At the end of year 10 into year 11, we start looking at Germany. From 1890 to 1945. There's a little bit on the Kaiser's Germany and Germany in the First World War, which links nicely to the previous unit, which was of course the First World War. But then the majority of the course is really focused on trying to understand how the Nazi Party take control of Germany, a Germany that was one of the most literate, developed countries in the world, and how it falls to this tyranny in the 1930s. And then also it looks at what life was like for German people under the Nazis. How far did they control people? What was life like for German women under the Nazis compared to the previous Weimar democracy? What was life like for young people? How were they seen? What role did they have? And also we'll look at the opposition to Hitler and how effective that was during this time. And we take the story through to the Second World War, the defeat of Germany and the collapse of the Third Reich. And finally we look at Norman England, 1066 to 1100. So we take the story from the death of Edward the Confessor without any heirs, look at the rivals for the throne, and understand how William of Normandy comes over to England, manages to invade and consolidate his rule. And then we look at the idea of change and continuity. So how far does England change as a result of the Norman conquest? Obviously we've got some of the physical changes around us in the castles like Corfe and Christchurch Castle, as reminders of some of those impacts. The course is ultimately assessed 100% through exams. There's no coursework. And there's 2 papers, each lasting for 2 hours in the summer of year 11. Each paper covers 2 units of the 4. So that means basically you've got 1 hour of examination for each unit. And it's not all lengthy essays at all. There's a range of questions from 4 mark to 8 mark questions, and then one what I call a mini essay in each paper, either for 12 or 16 marks, depending on the paper. That's the longest answer students have to write. So it's more about understanding the big issues and concepts than writing lots and lots of essays, although there is naturally some writing in history because it is a literacy-based subject. Why do we think that people should study GCSE history? Well, it is one of the most highly respected traditional academic subjects, so it's a good subject to have in your qualifications. It's also got a very wide range of transferable skills which are vital in further education and the workplace. You can see them listed there, but things like critical thinking, analysis, evaluation, looking at evidence, weighing up how relevant it is, how convincing it is, communication skills, both verbal in terms of discussion and debate, and written, problem solving, research, and as I mentioned with Britain, Migration and Empire, it's that tolerance and respect for other cultures and nations. And ultimately it is fascinating, it's really interesting, students do enjoy it, but it's also challenging, and that's a good thing, I think, that students are challenged academically, challenged in terms of their preconceptions as they go through the course. And finally, extracurricular opportunities. I'm not going to make any promises here with recent events, but we normally have an annual trip to Berlin. Now obviously for the last two groups this hasn't been able to take place, unfortunately, but it's a fantastic trip, and we very much hope to get that up and running as soon as we reasonably can. We've also over the recent years introduced a really successful programme of lectures. I think we've had over 20 now. We've got a partnership with Southampton University, and we have a series of 4 lectures in March and another series of 4 in November, open to students and their parents. These are really delivered by leading academics from Southampton, really to try and build on some of their knowledge, which in things that they've looked at GCSE and A level, but also take them beyond that and really give them a taste for higher level academic study as well, and really can stretch and challenge them, which should prove really successful. So hopefully that covered the basics. If your children have got any further questions, they can ask their class teacher to talk about this a little bit more, or please feel free to contact me at the school. That's Mr. Hall, and you can contact me at the school and I'll be glad to answer any further questions or specific inquiries. Thank you very much for your time.